How's it going, everybody? It feels like it's been forever since I've made a video. Just a long weekend, I guess, but it was a good one. So how was yours? You can tell me. Anyway, what I'm doing today is I'm going to talk about something that came up on the RPG site. I've been a member of the RPG site for a while now. I'm not terribly active. I think I've only made like 15 posts ever. But occasionally I do check up on there. I'm just really not very good with forums, to be perfectly honest. But if you don't know what it is, it's a forum for discussing role-playing game stuff. It's run by RPG Pundit. It's moderated quite differently than the ones that you might encounter, like RPG Net and things like that. I'll put a link in the description if you're interested in checking it out. But one of the things that happened, there were things that made me aware and made me want to go and do some stuff on there again, is that there was a bit of a stink raised by somebody. I'm not going to mention names. I will say that there's somebody who has a serious beef with the RPG site. The reason I'm not mentioning names is I'm trying to avoid like drama and harassment and all that kind of stuff. Somebody who had a beef with the RPG site, who has for quite a while, who's probably complained several times in the past. But basically, they were trying to say this is not a good place to go, and here's why. And the thing that they were pointing to was a discussion about putting attribute bonuses and penalties on women characters that are human, basically. Now, what was presented in there is basically kind of stuff you would expect. It was penalties to strength, bonus to charisma, intelligence was the same. Wisdom was a slight bonus. Constitution was capped at, I think, 16. Strength was capped at 14, that kind of thing. So basically what you're left with is a character that is mostly destined to lead henchmen. Oh yeah, there's also a bonus to dexterity. Maybe be a good thief. Potentially be a good wizard. That's the kind of thing that you might see with it. As far as being a cleric, you could pull off a decent cleric with it. You'd be kind of a subpar fighter, possibly. Sometimes it's hard to roll higher than a 14 anyway if you're using 3d6 straight down the line. So that was basically what they presented, and then they gave their particular spiel for why that was the case. Eventually, somebody followed and said, "Well, actually, men would be better at all these things." And I was like, I don't know about that. It's a whole other thing. Now, am I going to give my bonuses and penalties to what I would do with women characters? No, I'm not going to do it. There's really not much point in me doing it because basically I'm going to say that I personally don't see the merits of doing it in the first place. You could engage with the idea from an intellectual exercise, as somebody in the thread posited, but I just don't. You know, there was somebody that very correctly pointed out that the fact that, you know, we use the attribute scores in the way that we do would actually allow in a lot of circumstances for certain things to put towards one gender on one thing and then one gender on another thing on the same stat, you know, depending on how you interpret that stat, and that those things, it could even be like within the same threshold of what we typically associate with those things. And I think that that's true. A lot of times there are a lot of arguments about what exactly falls under constitution, what exactly falls under wisdom and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, we can look at the brief little explanations that are provided in various manuals and things like that. But even then, sometimes those can be differing and contradictory and stuff like that. So what do we do? Really, what I'm going to hang my hat on is just me saying that I don't see the merits in it, really, whenever you're thinking of applicability to the table. Now, here's why. Let's say you have a table of nothing but male players, just men, just men, strictly men, and nobody gives a crap. You know, okay, then like everybody wants to play a man anyway. You didn't really get anything out of it, did you? You didn't really get anything out of it. Let's say that you have a table with men and women, and the women want to play men too. Okay, you still didn't really get anything out of it. Let's say you have a table of men and women, or let's say we'll just say just a table of men, and they wanted to play. Some of them wanted to play women just because. Okay, maybe They play the woman and they decide, well, I get that bonus to charisma. I'm going to do this. So I'm going to play like a sultry vixen type character and I'm going to seduce people and all that kind of stuff. And really it's kind of, it's kind of, it's kind of like stuff that some women want to play that way too. Chelsea does. And she likes to play those kind of characters. Then, okay, you may have gotten a benefit there. Maybe you got a benefit there. Like I said, maybe you have some women that want to play that kind of character, and that's the only kind of woman character they want to play. Then you got a benefit there, perhaps. But the moment that you encounter somebody that wants to play a woman character that does not follow that mold, then of course you're looking at an issue. So then you can say, according to what they laid out, I'm going to use their logic and all that kind of stuff. They could say, according to their logic, that the reasoning for all of that was for realism. The problem is that there are people that do not want to play the opposite sex, or maybe they don't want to play the same sex. It just depends. More often than not, from what I've seen, people don't want to play the opposite sex as a character for an extended period of time. I can't think of any woman who has played at my table that has played a man character. And I've had a lot of women play at my table. I cannot think of a single one. I've had trans men play men. I've had non-binary people play men. When it comes to just women, not really. I've had a man play. I've had two men play women characters before. And that's really about it. For the most part, people tend to try to play according to their sex at my table. Now, it's not exclusive. There are many people that I know of, from reputation or I watch their videos and them talking about their kind of stuff, that are women who have played man characters. Sometimes they'll say that the reason that they do so is because that way they won't get harassed by other man characters played by men. Sorry, my bearded dragon is losing his stuff. He wants out. Anyway, that is something that I have seen. So I'm not saying that this is across the board, just a rule for life kind of thing that you're just going to encounter all the time. There will be people that will diverge from that, but in my experience, it tends to be more often than not that people want to play roughly about the same gender that they are, just roughly. So if we take that, then add to that the fact that you are putting some kind of arbitrary, again, they're going to use realism as the excuse. Or the reasoning. Excuse is a poisoning the well type word. I'm not going to do that. Then what they are going to do is put it in a position where that player has to play something that they don't want to play no matter what. They either have to play a man if they want to play a fighter that is really good at what they do, and plus they get that experience bonus, and all that kind of stuff. Or they got to play a woman and not play a fighter that they were wanting to play. And you can kind of understand where I'm getting at here. The benefit that you're reaping from this, or at least the perceived benefit, is that it pushes a particular archetype, perhaps, which is really why we like to differentiate between the different fantasy species and races. For instance, elves, they have a particular vibe about them, this kind of alien, immortal, otherworldliness and deep connection to magic, this intrinsic connection to magic and things like that. The halflings have this connection to just being these witty, stealthy guerrilla warfare type individuals and things like that. Races class is something that has facilitated that accentuation of archetypes for a long time. And even whenever you're just, having a bonus here, a bonus there, penalty there, with or level limits or whatever, what you're doing is you're creating meaningful choices for the players to make. You're saying, okay, you can go ahead and, get this thing where they got infravision, they got magic, at first level. They also get to attack with swords and all that kind of stuff, but they level slower and they have a lower level cap and they don't have as many class options and that kind of thing. That's what you want to do ultimately, is you want to make it where there is an appealing choice to be made that is meaningful. Otherwise, and so really both of those things, a lot of times people take out the meaningful and they're just like, oh, you just get choices. That's basically what you get with the more modern approach, where it's like, well, you just kind of pick whatever traits you want and you get your feats and, whatever. And they're basically the same. Everybody has this or that. And, it's kind of, and then the other direction, of course, being early D&D, where it's like, well, I say early D&D, basic, where it's just like, no, that's an elf. An elf is an elf is an elf. You level up and you're elf level 2, that kind of thing. So whenever you are whenever you're trying to accentuate those things, if you're strictly trying to deal it for realism because it helps with verisimilitude, which I do understand the desire for verisimilitude, you always have to weigh, does the pro outweigh the con? I guess for some people it might. For me, no, it really doesn't. The fact that I could have a female character that could potentially outlift a male character, it doesn't really bother me. Whenever you look at what are the top ends of what you get, especially in BX, before you have the aughts or, the percentile strength and stuff like that. Before you have all that, it's like, okay, I'm a little bit more likely to hit. I do a little bit of extra damage whenever I do hit. I am a little bit more likely to bust down doors and bend bars and stuff like that. And that's about it. That's the crux of what I get. Who cares? Is that really such a big deal? Is that really such a big thing to worry about? And again, the thing that you're giving up is potentially an opportunity for a player to play the gender or sex that they want and to experience the particular class archetype that they're interested in. There's really, basically, if you want to look at archetypes from a male and female perspective, whenever you're trying to talk about fiction and, culture and all this kind of stuff, particularly fiction, then a lot of times what you're going to have is the female archetype, and a lot of those things, except for more contemporary works, are going to be, I say that, there's like some Conan characters, and there are some characters, some female characters that really do the ass kickery and things like that, but it's not quite as plentiful. And a lot of times, depending on where you're looking, it's often damsel in distress or the sultry vixen who's going to charm you and, have your catch you with your pants down kind of thing. That's a lot of times what is presented. And maybe that's just not interesting to them. And I think that if that's just not interesting to them, that's kind of a case where I would think that it's just not really worth. It's not really worth giving, having the grief. I would say it's just better to just drop it. Personally, just drop it. If you're really striving for verisimilitude that far, then, you could follow that road a little bit further and you'd realize that there are some other things that you're not putting in there that maybe it's because you realize it's a little bit too fudged up and that you really don't have a good argument for, like the same argument that I would use against this is pretty much, kind of close to the same argument that you would use against that. So, yeah, I just don't think it's worth it. I don't think it's worth it. Let me know what you think. This is probably the worst idea ever because the comments are probably going to be terrible. Absolutely terrible. I am going to just go ahead and say that, please be careful in the comments. Don't get me banned. I will moderate if I have to, but if you really want to chime in on the conversation, it's going on at the RPG site. So you can go make an account there and, put in your opinion. But for me, I'm leaving that alone. If we're playing a particular kind of role-playing game that's set in a particular environment where it's kind of expected that women are going to be played substantially different than men, and that's something that everybody agrees to, then fine. I'm cool with that. Ultimately, you should run the kind of game that you want to run, because life is short and there are only so many games out there that you can run. So, don't waste your time running games that you're not interested in. I just believe that if I were ever faced with a player that says, well, I really don't like these limits in this situation because I want to play a woman character, then I would want to side with them. Sorry, my eye was itching for some reason. Allergies, probably. I would side with them. It's kind of the same thing whenever the whole wheelchair thing came up, and I was talking about if I had a player that was wheelchair bound, who came to the table and said, I want to play a character in a wheelchair, and let's figure that out, then I would work with them, even though for me it would be kind of a verisimilitude thing a little bit. I'd work with it, because ultimately making sure that people have a good time at the table is kind of what I'm there for, within reason. And to me, that's within reason. I'm not going to change my entire play style. I'm not going to change the genre. I'm not going to take the ultra bloody, gory, torturous mess that I want to run and then make it super fluffy Care Bears, just because somebody at the table is actually quite opposed to torture, violence, etc. I would just say there's other games for you. Absolutely. Just whoop, go on. But when it comes to something that largely boils down to some kind of basic aesthetic or something like that, then I don't really care. It's not that important to me. We all have to make those decisions. I'm not going to sit here and tell you how you should run your table. That's not my job. This is just my opinion. So give me your opinion, and please don't get me banned. See y'all later.